It is no secret that scathing disagreements over religious and moral issues have long divided Americans into two distinctive camps, between conservative Christians and secular liberals, conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats, and Trump supporters on the one hand, and then Hillary and Biden supporters on the other. And you know that most secular liberals aren't too fond of conservative Christians and the Christian faith. Why? Well, first, the most hated doctrine in all the world today is the exclusivity of Christ in salvation, meaning there is no salvation apart from believing in Jesus Christ. Unquestionably, leading the charges are secular liberals, many of whom are agnostics and atheists. Second, secular liberals are not too happy about our biblical morality, which they believe is a seedbed of intolerance and narrow-mindedness. And secular liberals do not mince their words when they express how they really feel about conservative Christians. For example, many years ago, senior writer for Time magazine, Weisskopf, he quipped that conservative Christians are poor, uneducated, and easy to commend. And new atheist Sam Harris, in his book, The End of Faith, he states that religious belief should not survive an elementary school education. Just to be fair, some Christian leaders have been dismissive of secular liberals as well. They have said things like 9/11 was God's judgment against sins of social liberalism. So these are two groups that are in conflict, a lot of hostility between the two. So why does this matter? The great divide between the two hostile groups who do not like each other's beliefs and values. Why is that relevant to today's world amid the COVID-19 pandemic? Now, we are told in 1 Corinthians 31, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. So how do we do that? Do it all for the glory of God when this acrimonious divide is rearing its ugly head over whether to reopen U.S. economy and cease social distancing or continue to stay the course, that is, maintain social distancing while the economy sinks to new low each passing day. And apparently, this battle is fought again between conservative Christians on the one hand and those who oppose them, many of them secular liberals on the other. Probably like journalist Catherine Stewart, who on March 27th wrote a New York Times op-ed entitled "The Religious Right's Hostility to Science is Crippling Our Coronavirus Response." Now, I read the article, and to me, she bit more than she can chew in a limited space, and also she was quite careless with her terminologies that similarly insinuated that if you favor reopening U.S. economy and easing social distancing, then you are uncritical in your thinking and a denier of science. Her phraseology, a denier of science. Now, her outlook is largely based on few obnoxious Christian leaders whose antics I too have issues with. She gave several examples. One pastor called those concerned with coronavirus pansies. Another pastor handed out so-called anointed handkerchief to ward off virus. Still, another pastor told his congregation, rather irresponsibly in my opinion, quote, "Do you believe God would bring his people to his house to be contagious with the virus? Of course not," end of quote. Now, to be fair, Ms. Stewart did note that, quote, "Not every pastor is behaving recklessly. Of course, and not every churchgoer in this uncertain time is showing up for services out of disregard for the scientific evidence." Scientific evidence? That's, of course, over-the-top phraseology. Scientific evidence? More like common sense, because we were told by experts that the novel virus was highly contagious. Well, be that as it may, that was March 27th. Today is May 17th. Last week, someone sent me a short video clip of an American pastor of a large church in Southern California. Now, I know him personally, Pastor Jack. He's a wonderful man of God, passionate for God, and really reasonable in his faith. And he, like all the pastors I know, was very concerned about the COVID-19 pandemic. So he had his church closed ever since March. That's to say, Pastor Jack isn't one of those pastors who, according to Catherine Stewart, behave recklessly. Those few pastors who dismiss social distancing. He's not one of them. But now, Pastor Jack is concerned about the fallout from a very possible economic collapse, leading to, and I quote, starvation, homelessness, severe depression, and even suicide. And I might add that these are real concerns that no one should scoff at. So Pastor Jack said in the video, quote, the local community has been spiritually starving. So are we going to open up the doors of our church? Are we going to continue to preach the gospel? Are we willing to obey God and get back to the business of the church? And then he declared, quote, with much prayer and fasting, and we have decided on a day to reopen the church doors. May 31st will be a day of great rejoicing as we meet for Sunday morning services. End of quote. So I wonder how the Catherine Stewarts of the world may respond to what Pastor Jacks of the world are trying to do. What do you think?
In short, not much different from how the Romans responded to the believers in the early church. Hostility.
Now, one main reason for Rome's hostility against Christians is their refusal to participate in emperor worship. Jesus is Lord. But what really worked to stir up the crowd against Christians was bogus charges. Those always work better than real charge. So what were some insults aimed at them? There were three in particular. Romans accused Christians of being cannibals. What? Cannibals? Because they heard that, Christians eat the body of Christ and drink his blood. So they're cannibals. Another superior charge was, they were incestuous. What? Incestuous? Because they heard that the Christian brothers and sisters, they love each other. So, they're like committing incest. And then, ironically, Romans called Christians atheists. Atheists? Why? Well, it kind of makes sense because Christians didn't believe that nature was divine. They didn't accept rocks, reptiles, and birds as gods, as Romans did. So in the Romans' eye, you Christians are atheists. So these were the insults that were leveled against Christians. Although that was then, not much has changed today in terms of accusing Christians. I mean, many of us are on the wrong side of volatile social issues. Haters, bigots, and misogynistic, they say. What about respect to coronavirus? What do you think? I hazard a guess that they will say the following. Those ignorant Christians, they will have us get infected and send the old and the weak among us to their deathbed. But make no mistake, those who want to open their church doors as early as May 31st will have several reputable doctors and scientists, not named Dr. Fauci, who are actually backing them up. These are credible professionals who are calling for a sensible approach to open things up, sooner rather than later.
A sensible approach including social distancing, wearing masks, and the elderly and the infirm in quarantine.
That would include the impeccably credentialed Dr. David Katz, who appeared on super liberal Bill Maher's Real Time on HBO. That's to say, Catherine Stewart, who always talks about science this and science that, has nothing on Dr. Katz, a graduate of Einstein School of Medicine and Yale School of Public Health. meaning she cannot accuse him of being a science denier. Dr. Katz also wrote a New York Times op-ed entitled, "Is Our Fight Against Coronavirus Worse Than the Disease?" In other words, is our cure worse than the disease? Atheist and secular liberal Bill Maher agree with Dr. Katz, who apparently is not a fan of Donald Trump, President Trump. But the only cable news that invited Dr. Katz to hear his ideas as of April 24th is Fox, not CNN or MSNBC. What will the Catherine Stewarts of the world, mostly secular liberals, will say about the believers when normal pastors, like Pastor Jack, open up their church doors as early as May 31st? As far as some secular liberals are concerned, there's no good date to open up church doors. In other words, it will suit these secular liberals just fine if church doors stay closed forever. Do you think atheists like Sam Harris, who wrote End of Faith, gives a hoot? Do you really believe Bill Maher, who once said, quote, "If you're going to regulate anything that has the most potential to cause death and destruction, is religion," end of quote, is losing any sleep over whether churches are going to open their doors at all? No. What am I implying? It could be that no matter when you open up church doors this year,
even if you practice social distancing, wear a mask, and ensure that the elderly, the infirm, and the healthcare professionals stay home,
you are likely to be accused. You are spreading the virus. You don't care about people. You deny science.
So then how should we respond when we are accused? Not necessarily because we are against science or facts, but because of our ideology. That is to say, our Christian faith and biblical morality that runs counter to reigning cultural paradigm in this post-truth world. We will look into that in part B of this message entitled Glorifying God Amid Culture War Fought on the Turf of the COVID Pandemic.